Throughout this course, we have mentioned that everything in Python is an object. I'm going to dive into that a little deeper in this section. An object is created from a class. It is an instance of a class. While that may make no sense to you at the moment, it is going to become clear as we go through this video. In general, an object will have access to properties or attributes of a class and also methods of the class. If we think of a list object, a list type, we have seen that it had several methods associated with the list object, such as append, extend, and pop, for examples. These methods are functions that belong to the class. When a function is defined for a class, we generally refer to it as a method. So a class is a template or a blueprint for creating objects. An object is an instance of a class. Again, I'll refer back to our lists. In each script or program, we could have several lists, and each list is a list object from the list class. When we create an object, you will often hear the term to instantiate, and this is simply when we create an instance of a class. We create an object from our class. An object can have methods, which is a defined function within the class. So we've seen that we have a string class, we have a list, we have tuple, we have a dictionary, and we have sets. And each of these classes have their own defined methods. We couldn't use a string method on one of our lists, for example. A class will also have attributes. You'll often hear these called properties, and it is simply a variable that's bound to an instance of a class or an object. And we'll take a look at attributes in this section. We mentioned that a class is a template or a blueprint. So let's think about a car, and we'll keep this simple. Let's say we work for Ford. Our cars have similar attributes or properties. They can have a colour, they'll have a model, number of doors, size of wheels, miles per gallon, and so on. A car also needs to be able to perform actions, and these are defined in methods such as accelerate, brake, indicate, and so on. So when we are constructing a car, we state the properties that are required. For here, we'll just say we need a colour and a model. This piece of code here is known as a constructor. When we are creating our car, we need to define what colour it is and what model it is. That individual car will then inherit that colour and that model from our constructor. And all the cars that we create can use the same methods, such as to accelerate or brake, for example. We can then use our class constructor to instantiate a car object. Here we are making 3 different cars from our car class. Once we have instantiated, we now have an object of that class. It is an instance of our car class. Now let's think back to the properties. Our constructor, we had car that took in a colour and a model. And these are the attributes of the object. We used our blueprint to create a red Ford Fiesta, a blue Ford Focus, and a green Ford Mondeo. And all of our cars have access to the methods that were defined in our class, such as accelerate, brake, indicate, and so on. Let's throw to PyScripter and dip into how we create a class in Python. Okay, we're in PyScripter, and it's going to start in the interpreter window, and I want to create a variable called myList, and I'm going to set that equal to the built-in list function. And if I do not supply any parameter, this is going to create an empty list. We now have a list object. We can see it is from the class list. In Python, you will hear class and type used interchangeably. And we've seen that our list object, when we hit the dot, we have a selection of methods that we can use, such as append, count, and pop. These are what are known as class methods. If I click on append, and I'm going to wrap this in the help function. I'm going to remove the parentheses for append and I'll hit enter. And we can see that the append is a method of the built-ins list instance. Append will allow us to append a value to our instance of that list object. Just always remember that everything in Python is an object. We'll now open up a new script and we'll delete the default code. So how do we create our own custom class that we can create our own objects? Very simply, we use the class keyword and then we define a name for the class. We will call it point. It is standard practice that your class name begins with a capital letter. It is also standard practice that when you save the class to a script, that you name the script the same as the class name. We'll put a colon and hit enter. We now define our constructor function. Like any other function, we now define our constructor function or method. So we begin with def and we use a double underscore in it and another double underscore followed by parentheses and a colon. Now in our parentheses we need to put in the word self. Now this self, you don't actually have to use the word self. You could use any other word as long as it wasn't a keyword or it wasn't in conflict with any other variable that you're using for the class. But it is standard practice in Python to use the self keyword. And this self basically means this instance of the class. You'll find that some IDEs put this in automatically for you and they use self, and you should really use the self keyword here because some programs may automatically look for it, and if it's missing, your program may not work. Now we know that a point is made up of x and y, and of course optionally z. We're going to stick with x and y for now. So we'll put in x and y, and inside our function I'm just going to put in the keyword pass. We'll step out of our class. I can now create a variable called point_1. Set this equal to our point class. When I put in parentheses, we can see it is looking for an x and y value. I'll just put in 10 and 50 and hit enter. I'm going to print the type of our point1 variable. I'll clear the Python interpreter and I'll run the script. And we can see that we have a class point. So you've successfully just created your first class in Python. We check back on our script. We defined our class name. We then defined the constructor method for our class, which takes in an x and a y value. We then instantiated an object by calling our class and supplying in an x and y as the constructor values. When we printed the type of our point1 variable to screen, we saw that it was a point class. This video was to act as an introduction to classes and objects in Python programming. A class is a template for creating objects. An object is an instance of a class. When we create an instance of a class, this is called instantiation. And as we're going to see over the next couple of videos, we can add in class attributes or properties and also class methods.